Hi, everyone. Welcome to Summer EBT Deep Dive, Strategies for Creating a Strong Application, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click the CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel. With that, I'll hand it over to Kelsey Boone, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Steve. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. Can we go to the next slide? So we have a lot to cover today. We're going to start with some brief introductions and an overview of current landscape, and then we will move into the Nutrilink application option and capabilities. That conversation will be led by Brent England, the COO of Nutrilink Technologies. And then we'll move on to see it in action with Connecticut's Nutrilink application. That will be presented by Shannon Yearwood, the Bureau Chief of the Connecticut State Department of Education. And then we will get into some non-Nutrilink applications, and that will be a conversation of Virginia's application system by Kirsten Kraft, Innovation Specialist, Innovation and Strategic Initiatives in the Virginia Department of Social Services. Next slide. So really quickly, let me just go over the landscape that we're looking at for 2025. So in 2024, we had 37 states, 2 ITOs, and all territories participating in the Summer EBT program. In 2025, those planning to participate are 38 states, 5 Indian tribal organizations, and all territories. Just a quick note that Tennessee participated in 2024, but has stated they will not in 2025. And we did have Alabama and Utah opting into the program after not participating in 2025, which is exciting. Next slide. Just some really quick reminders about 2025 deadlines. So February 15th, states must submit their plans of operation and management to USDA. And the new requirements in 2025 that were not enforced in 2024 are a statewide Summer EBT application, as well as, which is what we'll be talking about today, as well as statewide databases. If you have any questions on statewide databases, you can watch our January 9th webinar on databases, which is currently on FRAC's YouTube channel. Next slide. So let me go over some of the requirements of the statewide application that USDA has put out. So a Summer EBT application must only require the following, which is the names of children and other household members, the amount, source, and frequency of income for each household member, and the signature of an adult household member, and that can be an electronic signature. Other information can be required on the application as long as there is a way to opt out of answering or answer not known or I don't know, and that is a mailing address, a date of birth, and the child's school. And the last piece is that Social Security numbers cannot be required for an application to be considered complete. So even the last 4 digits of a Social Security number cannot be a required component. It can be present, but it cannot be required. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brent England to talk about Nutrilink Summer EBT application.
Great. Thanks so much, Kelsey. All right. So let me give you a timeline of this Nutrilink application that we provided for USDA. The project started really April, May of 2024, and the application went live on July 1st of 2024. We have a kind of a 3-year option, so we've renewed for the option for approved for this period of March 2026, and then year 3 option will go through March 2027. And so at that time, then USDA can decide if they want to continue renewing for another option, or if they want to cancel the contract. And certainly we will still provide the Summer EBT to states. 6 states went live for the 2024 Summer EBT period. We have 2 more that are coming on board very soon, and then we have about 9 that we've spoken with or in various stages of onboarding, data sharing agreements or technology consortiums, different things that we're going to have to work with and finalize before those come on board. But we do expect more to be coming on board for 2025 since we got it in so late in 2024. And this is no cost to the states or entities, ITOs as well. So there is no cost to the state. So we take care of everything. We host it. We have no cost. If there is anything that you want customized outside of the customizations already available, we would work with you to do that. But most states are using it as the default application. Go to the next slide, please. So what's included? First of all, we designed this to serve all states and ITOs. It does meet all of the SEBT application requirements, as Kelsey pointed out. It provides a complete application every time. And then the USDA wanted us to model this after their free and reduced prototype that they did back in 2017. It has a lot of pieces like integrity focused, user accessibility. There's a lot of standards that we put in there as far as web design standards and font styles and colors. And then, of course, mobile friendly. We've seen in this past year about 84% of applicants are filling this out on a mobile device. And of course, this is a software as a service, meaning that we host everything. You're going to get, you would have a link to the application for your state or entity, and then you have an admin portal where you can collect the applications. All right, next. Customizations for states and ITOs, we have direct URL, which I mentioned that. You can put your state logo, before and after messaging. We have some labeling for the SNAP TANF FDPIR labeling if you want to use that. School name, street address, city for lookup pieces. So parents, and I'll show you that in a minute on the application, that they can look up based on those fields. And then it can incorporate additional fields. So if you had a state student ID and a local student ID, you want to try to capture that information, we can add multiple fields on the application. And then, of course, changing the field labels to accommodate your state or ITO. We do field validation. Obviously, a name should have letters, not numbers. And then we do have custom export formats that work with your different systems there. Okay, next. All right, so let's look at this UI. So I realize some of you may be working with, maybe you're not as familiar with kind of the application process. So certainly those that are working with states know that this is an option and this is available, and very easy to set up and onboard. And so this option is available. So let's go to the next slide and look at the UI. So first of all, I want to point out some things. First of all, the language, of course, we're going to be adding 5 more languages to this USDA, and we've been talking with them about which languages to add. So we'll add 5 additional here in the next few months before the summer 2025 period. So you'll see those in those drop-down boxes just like that. These are instant translations, meaning as soon as you select it at any point during the application, it'll translate that, and then it'll carry through that language of choice to the very end of the format. Okay, let's go to the next. Throughout the application, you have different tooltips. So these are great to kind of give the applicant information about what type of, let's say, income in this case. What is net income? What is different parts of the application, gross income. So we have tooltips that'll hover over. And then go ahead into the next slide. We also have this frequently asked questions or this help section. So you can pull this up on any page. It's kind of tailored to the page, but you'll have the ability to search. The applicant will be able to search for any field. And so that field will be available to them during the process. They can type in a keyword and find information or questions and answers about that field. I think somebody mentioned back to the language, Arabic is part of one of the ones we requested. So we'll see which ones USDA is going to give us. But yes, we did mention that one. All right, go to the next screen. Throughout the progress, and Shannon's going to show a little bit more on this on the Connecticut side, but we've got kind of the smart progress board bar. So part of this USDA prototype that they did was kind of based off of kind of wizard or step-by-step, really based off of the U.S. income applications for IRS or you know, if you're filling out your taxes. So this smart bar will take you through each step of the process. You can't go forward until you complete the current step or stage you're on. This kind of shows, obviously, we're going to grab some of the required fields. There's optional fields that we can work with you, in this case, school names, so they can type in really any of the parameters. So obviously, we're going to have all the schools in the states that are NSLP schools, for example. You can upload those, or you can upload all schools when we work with you how we want to make that decision. But they can type in the street, the city, or even the school name, and all those available options will pop up, and they can choose their school. All right, next slide. We also do have the option to add these SNAP or TANF categorical features, SNAP, TANF, FDPIR. This is optional. We certainly cannot have this, but we can turn this on or off, and this allows them to enter that number, that case number. They probably are already streamlined in a lot of cases, so they would really just bypass this step, but certainly they can put that in, and we can validate that field, meaning that it has to be a certain length or start with a certain number. There's a lot of parameters we can do with that to help you get, you know, good data. All right, let's go to the next one. We also have the ability to add foster, homeless, migrant, runaway as well categories. So very much like the NSLP, the National School Lunch Program application, we can add all of those. We are adding the ability to remove those. So if that's something that the state does not want, we can opt those. I think foster and homeless, migrant, runaway are not required. I do think the SNAP and TANF is something where they do need to have the ability to input that based on the initial requirements. But you can include this if you like. All right, let's go to the next. Guided income interview questions. So again, this USDA prototype, so it's going to ask them about all different types of income. Are they in the military? Do they have pension or strike benefits or supplemental security income? All of those questions, it's going to walk each household member as well as student through those questions. So it's going to ask them one student or one household member at a time. They're going to select yes or no on those income questions, and depending on what they select, it will only ask them those next questions about that type of income. So go ahead and go to the next slide here. So this is what it looks like when they go to the income screen where they're going to input the income. So they've selected they have earnings. So we're going to ask them about salary, wages, tips, commissions, the normal standard income questions that you would see on many applications. And then we're going to provide different frequencies. So they can select hourly, and then it will ask them how many hours per week or per month, and they can input that, and it will automatically calculate their amount for them. Of course, they have other options too, annually or yearly, weekly, every other week. So, and the tooltips explain that, as well as the frequently asked questions about what's the difference between every 2 weeks and every other week, for example. All right, next slide. And then after they get through these income questions, they're going to go to the contact information page, and this is where we can add some custom fields. You have the name of the preferred contact, the mailing address, city, state, zip. These are optional, as Kelsey mentioned, but you can ask these, and then it's going to validate the address. So we're going to make sure we get a good address based on what they're inputting. We're going to do a search for it. They can verify it. It'll look up the address to see if the the address is there in the system, and then they can select that. All right, and then wanted to mention mobile friendly. Again, 84% are filling this out on mobile devices. So if you have this mobile device friendly, we obviously made this for Android and Apple devices. Most of them are coming through on Apple devices, but there is about 30% coming on Android devices. So that's the vertical format. So you see the timeline changes to percentage. That's why everything is vertical. The color contrast is very clear. And so that way somebody can fill this out very easily online. And so we continue to update that to work with different devices. All right, and then the last page is just a confirmation page. So this is where we can customize this, and then Shannon's going to maybe show you a little bit of what Connecticut did, but you can add lots of details here. You can have a link back to your website, or if there's a number that you want to reach out to for status, or anything. The confirmation number is just an indicator that we have received the application. And once we receive the application, we have it in our system. So we don't expect them to remember that confirmation number. The states will have the ability to look up that on the admin portion, look up the application by student name. All right, next. Okay, so 2024, we had a very quick turnaround to get the application in, and we were able to get that in and going. So 2025's got some really great enhancements, okay? So we're going to be doing kind of a pre-screening process a little bit. So some states are already doing this up front, which is great. We're going to also do some checking on our end if we receive duplicate applications and maybe give the applicant some instructions. A parent account, so a parent can create an account and kind of follow the application process, maybe get a status, things like that. Verification is going to be coming up soon, so USDA wanted some things on that, and so we're going to be working to add some verification for you to be able to pull the verification from the Nutrilink admin portal. API, application program interface, is for you technical people who, if you want to be able to access some of the data from a application program interface instead of our kind of user interface, admin user interface, we're going to be adding an API there to do that. Opt-out option, I think most of you probably know or understand what that is. That gives them the ability to opt out of the application. So an applicant could do that and go on the website and on the application and opt out instead of applying for Summer EBT benefits. And then you have the email confirmation, which is pretty obvious. We want to send an email confirmation back to the parent. We're going to be adding some new reporting features that we had not added in the initial scope of the work, and then a workflow where you can actually take the applications and put them in different kind of folders or workflow processes for the admin team. Okay. All right, I think I'm out of time. So that's my information, and you can certainly look at our website and we can talk with you. So if you have, I know many of you may not represent a state or an ITO, but certainly if you have states, just know that this is an option. Get the word out. Let them know. We can certainly, they have to go to that website, fill out a couple things, and we can set up a meeting with them and talk through how they might want to use the Summer EBT, the Nutrilink Summer EBT application.
Thanks so much, Brent. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Shannon.
Thank you. I just got done ordering my I Heart Nutrilink t-shirt. So I'm Shannon Yearwood, as Kelsey said, with the Connecticut State Department of Education. I'm the Bureau Chief here for the Bureau of Child Nutrition Programs, otherwise known as the Child Nutrition State Director. Just a little quick background. So I came into this position after being an advocate in the anti-hunger world for almost 20 years at that point that I became an administrator. So this program is something that is really exciting, that it's been authorized permanently, and it's really something that we really strongly believe in and making sure that we're administering here. In 2024, so as most of you probably know, there is a requirement for states who are opting into this program to be able to pay for half of the administrative costs with non-federal funds. And so that is a huge challenge in every state in trying to really secure those funds. And so we had actually been planning to start in 2025 and not in 2024. So we were, hoping to learn from other states, and then we had the powers that be in our states say, nope, we figured out the funding. We're going to move forward in 2024. That happens late December, which put us just in time to put our notification to USDA by that January 1st deadline and try and figure out how we were going to launch a program here in Connecticut in a 5 months period of time, including writing the plans for operations and management, making sure that our statewide student database really met the requirements of this permanent summer EBT program. So a little good news for us is that we actually in Connecticut back in 2010, we actually operated the summer EBT program as a demonstration project with USDA, and it was a very different type of program. the benefits kind of fluctuated year to year, and we had different restrictive parameters, and so it was very nuanced in how it had to operate. And so we operated that for about 8 years and had just been awarded the opportunity to kind of reinvigorate that for 3 years once the pandemic hit, and we had to pause everything. And as everybody here knows, the whole world pivoted, and so we operated Pandemic EBT, and again, we're able to really be successful at that from a lot of our learned experiences through Summer EBT. And I want to put that out there just because as a state agency, I know we think of us as folks on the outside are like, oh, it's the government. We're human beings and we're doing our very best. So just to put it out there. As soon as we got the word that we were going to operate in 2025, I reached out to my SNAP counterpart at our the State Nutrition Assistance Program. As you guys all know, acronyms are very hard to avoid in our world. So I reached out to him. We do really anything EBT very hand in hand, especially in the SNAP outreach world, since that's so important in the school space as well. And so we came up with a way. We're like, oh, how are we going to do this? We're thumb wrestling over which parts are going to be done by which agency. Neither of us had staffing to be able to do this with and launch this huge statewide program of with brand new rules in such a short period of time, which is just very unprecedented for the government to be able to do that with all of the permissions and approvals and things that we have to go through. So we were actually looking at trying to launch our own statewide application, and we could only think of ways to do it in a very static way where it was just really straightforward. So then Nutrilink came along with USDA and made all of our dreams come true. So I'm going to first show you what our paper application looked like. So you can go to the next slide, Steve, please. So I want to give you this. So this is our Connecticut application is based off of the USDA paper application for the National School Lunch Program for your reduced price meal benefits. And so these programs, because there's only one element that a National School Lunch Program application is required to have that the Summer EBT doesn't have. And so we were like, we really want to be able to capture. And so that's that last four of the Social Security number or an indication that you don't have one. And so that became very important for us. The other important thing for us was to really tie together the Summer EBT eligibility to that school meals eligibility for free or reduced price meals. And so we wanted to create a similar look and feel for an application that folks in our state were already used to filling out. And the requirements of the program are you have to have the paper application available. So this is what our paper application looks like. It doesn't get much bigger than this. It's about 2-point font in reality because we have so much information we're trying to fit in. So Steve, you can just kind of scroll through here. So you can see that was before was our first page where we have the household where folks can enter that household information in. They can attach an extra sheet of paper if necessary. And then the second, third, and fourth pages are really tiny font to be able to tell you all of the different complex nuances of how to fill this out. So we went to this, my partner over at Department of Social Services and I went to this USDA kind of unveiling of this Nutrilink partnership. And we went and we were a little bit trying to figure out how to get all of our enthusiasm up by adding this on without being able to pause some of our other responsibilities and how we were going to do this in a way that actually really got the benefits to the folks who are eligible for it and did it in as least of an administrative burden on them as possible. So we went to this presentation. One of the big barriers for us as a state was trying to figure out, so you guys know when a household submits those free reduced applications, they're doing that at the school level, and state agencies in the nutrition space don't collect that on a statewide level, and we don't do those income determinations on an individual student basis. So with this law, we have to, right? And so that became a big barrier, and also because of the restriction in the federal funding we didn't really have staff that could work on this and still be okay with the funds we're using to pay them. So we really the income determinations became a really big thumb wrestle between Department of Social Services and our agency. And so when we went to this Nutrilink USDA kind of unveiling, Nutrilink said, we're gonna, not only does our application look amazing, but we're going to do the income determinations before we send it to you to match for the other eligibility criteria. And we were like, sold, we're signing us up. So we contacted our now our new friends over at Nutrilink, and we were trying to figure out how they could possibly be doing this on behalf of the nation. And for those of you who work on summer meals programs, one of the things that I always like to say is, in our country, we always say there's no such thing as a free lunch. But there is for summer meals. And so when we were at this webinar and hearing all of these amazing things that Nutrilink was promising, we're like, there's no such thing, that no such thing as a free lunch. And we're not sure if the sales is going to be as good as it's sounding. Well, I'm telling you, it was way better. So you can go to the next. So keep in mind, that was our paper application. So Nutrilink, when they say they were going to customize it for our states, they spent several planning sessions with us. We had, as every state does, we take the federal names of programs and often rename them to be Connecticut specific. So in Connecticut, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, is known as Temporary Family Assistance. We felt really strongly that needed to be the Connecticut name because that's what our residents know it as. We also have 4 different public health insurance programs, all called Husky. So there's Husky A, B, C, and D, which in concept, I totally understand why we went with an easy to remember name. However, when it comes down to the household, there's no way for them to really know, unless you're in this kind of nutrition space, where the funding behind those Huskies are coming from. So in our state, Husky A is the Medicaid program, and we also participate in the Medicaid demonstration project for direct certification. So we are able to really reach a lot of kids through Husky A, and that does have an income limit on it, unlike SNAP and TFA. So I can talk about categorical eligibility all day, but you guys probably already know all about that. So we were able to really customize this. We came up with our logo, and we were able to have that be forward facing, and that was really important to us, and to be calling it Summer EBT because we operated a similar program in that pilot program for so long in Connecticut. We really wanted to stick with that name that was already known rather than moving towards that Sunbucks branding. So that was wonderful. So if you can go to the next slide. So it really just gives you a lot, and Brent kind of went through this to be able, and we got to customize this. We got to customize the tooltips that he was talking about. So when you roll over the question marks, we were able to customize the message that folks would see. And if you can go to the next slide. So another really helpful hint for us in our state is that we decided to issue the benefits on already existing cards that were either SNAP or TFA. We have multi-benefit cards here. We, during the demonstration project, had used a different card for Summer EBT, and that became very expensive. It became very confusing. Folks weren't able to, we just didn't have as much success as other states. It wasn't a good fit for our state. So when we issued pandemic EBT, we had felt strongly, and also because of the national card shortage, that we really wanted it to look like the same, just basic plain gray credit card that we issue otherwise. And so if you had a SNAP card or TFA benefits, you were already known to our Department of Social Services, we were able to add the SEBT benefits automatically to those cards. And so they would get a notification that it had been added. And then we also were able to change our first in, first out benefit rules with our processor to be able to make sure that those benefits were the first ones spent, so that since they have the shortest expungement timeline of the benefits also installed in that card. In Connecticut, a real easy way for us to know whether it's legitimate SNAP or TFA is it is a 9-digit client ID number, and it always starts with 00 or 10. So that's right there. If we know that somebody submitted an ID with a 2 or a different number, we know it's not SNAP or TFA, and we're going to have to do a little bit more work. So you can go ahead and switch. These are just some screenshots of, just the great information we were able to include. And then we kept it very similar to the prototype that Brent did show you. So we thought it was really helpful, and I can't remember what you called that, the timeline, I believe is what Brent called it, where it shows you exactly where you are in the application process. That was wonderful. So this was our first page, and you can go to the next one. So the other thing, so you'll see probably not very large, is that we have a unique student identifier in our state that is associated with the student's information within our statewide student database. And so that's the state assigned student ID, or SASID. And so that's a 10-digit number that we assign to every student. Many parents don't know where to find that. There are laws in Connecticut where school districts are required to display it in certain places, but the one place we know that they will always make sure that they're in compliance is on that student's report card. So in our tooltips, we were able, so one, we could add the field for our SASID because that became a critical piece of information. We couldn't add that to the paper application. There was no room for that, much less was there no room for a SASID. There was no room to explain to a parent where to find it. So on the tooltips, we were able to put, this is typically in the upper right-hand corner of your student's report card. And then we explain why we want them to find it, not just to create more hassle because it's not a required field, but so that we can more quickly determine who their child is and the eligibility for those benefits. Being able to provide the schools that participate in the National School Lunch Program, including our private schools who are under an interschool full service interschool agreement, was wonderful. We have in Connecticut, and again, I'm sure this is true in most states, we have so many schools with the same name, and so many parents don't even know the full names of their kids' school. They're just like, oh, ECS or WIS, and for us in the state agency, I'm trying to find the kids in our hundreds of thousands of student enrollment. We need to have the exact name, the exact town. And if we don't have that, because sometimes parents just aren't able to provide that, if we have that SASID number, we can find those kids in our database and we can really find them quickly and then find out their eligibility status. All right, you can go to the next one. Sorry, this is so small, everybody. I was used to this being up a little bit higher. All right, so this was where they had a little bit more information around SNAP and TFA. And then we can go to the next one. This was wonderful. So the language in this application was so user-friendly, and I think having it split up by child, so when you saw it in Brent's screenshots, and you can see here, this was in relation to Jane, who was the person that they were filling out this application on behalf of in this little demo. You can go to the next one. And so very similar to what Brent showed you is that is all going to say, does Jane qualify for this? Was Jane part of this? And that is it's so helpful for the households. And then we go through the other kids. So we're really hitting on all of the different fields that are in our National School Lunch Program free and reduced price application. And then all of those little question marks are things that we could customize. They had standard messaging and we were allowed to customize that to get more helpful hints for Connecticut. For instance, one of the things we learned early on is that when we started doing the Medicaid demonstration project, the child who is claimed on the benefits go to the head of the household who claims the child is a tax dependent. That was a learning lesson. So we were able to put in some tips about that because we fielded a lot of custody dispute calls during our issuances of pandemic EBT when different households then who is expecting to receive the benefits did receive them due to that mechanism. So that's something I think is folks just general knowledge of kind of some of the nuances in the back ends of these programs. We did for those, like I said before, those who are already known to our Department of Social Services, we issued on pre-existing cards. For those not known to the Department of Social Services, we issued the cards in the child's name. And so some households received multiple cards. All right, I think we can go to the next one. All right, just another few screenshots of how this worked, and we can go through this. Brent, I'm I'm so excited about the enhancements you have in store, especially for folks who may have already applied. Having some way to tell them that they've already applied would be tremendous. The verification, I'm like, sign us up for all of those. I already said that, but now I know what you're talking about and I'm all in. So then we go through the different adult sections, and then you can kind of scroll through this because I think we saw some of this is pretty standard based off of what Brent showed you. And then we always have to have the USDA non-discrimination statement. The summary, which I think that is also really, really great because it really pulls together the information so the household can look at it in one spot and say, yeah, I think this makes sense. I think this makes sense. So now for the next slide. So when we were trying to determine eligibility, right? So we're running two systems, we're running several different systems, we're matching, we're deduplicating. So when we had the paper application, all of the fields that you see on the left were all we had to work with in order to try and find that kid in our statewide, student database or Department of Social Services to see if they'd already been issued benefits. It is really eye-opening that a lot of folks really don't, the handwriting is always a challenge, but folks spell their kids' names differently in different places. And so it can be really hard to really be certain that the child that you are trying to match is actually that child. So one of the most critical things, as I mentioned before, is our SACID, but date of birth is also really important. And there's no room on the application, on the paper application for that. And so it became really challenging. And again, they're writing in the school and district. So going back to that, kind of casually referring to it, how they're used to referring to it in their community. And so then the Nutrilink app, which you guys can probably already tell, I loved. I did say I just ordered my shirt. So we had all of those fields. Plus, we could add the SACID, the date of birth, ethnicity, race, so that we can really see, like, when we're asking, like, what is our need for languages, we have some actual data for that. The applications, even if folks fill them out in Spanish, we get the information in English because they're pretty rote fields that folks are filling out. So that was also wonderful. And then we asked if they wanted to receive other information. We weren't able to operationalize that this year, but we will. And then it was their email, so we could easily reach out to them if we had questions about the information that they'd submitted. And then doing that income determination was just such a game changer for us, because we would still be trying to get the benefits out if that was something that was done at the state agency level, since it was pretty much just me over on this agency side. We were able to go in and extract the data from the back end of the Nutrilink application as often as we wanted to by different parameters. So we really, it just became such an important source of information for us. So we definitely we're signing up for the next however long this contract is through. So hopefully that renewal option will come from 2026 and we'll go into 2027 with this. But it really just helped us make sure that we found the right kids and got them their benefits, and we could see if there were any challenges between when we had sent out streamlined issuances to folks who were applying. And it's going to be critical as we look at implementing the new verification requirements that come with 2025 administration of this program. I think that was all I wanted to say. I'm sure I'll think of something as soon as we end, but thank you so much for having me. And yeah, check out Connecticut's website.
Thanks so much, Shannon. And now I will hand it off to Kirsten.
Thanks, Kelsey. Steve, you can go to the next slide, please. Hey, everybody. I am Kirsten. It's lovely to meet you. I'm an innovation specialist with the Department of Social Services in Virginia. And I have had the opportunity to work with our Summer EBT team since the very beginning. My background is really in user research and program design, and my passion is food security. So this project has been really fun for me and an absolute honor. Next slide, Steve. So while we're here to talk about applications, I wanted to give you a little bit of the relevant Virginia history here. So similar to Connecticut, Virginia was a pilot state in 2016 when we tested a similar version of, sorry, my dog is barking, not sure if you can hear him, a similar version of Summer EBT. And then that really helped set us up for success in 2023 when we were approached by FNS to be an early adopter or make an early commitment to operating Summer EBT. So with the blessing from our governor, we got to work in partnership with the Virginia Department of Education. And together we were able to deliver over $85 million in benefits to families and their children across the state. Next slide, please. So in Virginia, we have a really strong SNAP participation. So we knew that most of our children would be Streamline certified. We also needed low-tech, low-cost solutions for 2024. So we were really looking for an application process that we could build and own mostly in-house. So I'm going to talk to you about the actual application process, but I do want to acknowledge that we had a really robust website that had, searchable frequently asked questions. We also had an online screener tool so families could come and see if they were likely eligible and if they needed to apply. But specifically with our application process, families had two options. We had a paper application that was available online, and families could also apply over the phone. So with our paper application, families had to mail the application back to us or return it to a physical drop box. Those applications were scanned into our system, shared with VDOE daily to confirm eligibility, and then our benefits were issued every other Friday to verified applicants. Next slide, please. So this is what our numbers look like. So as you can see at the top, most of our children were Streamline certified. We only worked with about 2,000 kids through paper applications, but that is still a very important percentage of our population. And we know that paper applications are hard for families to use. They're hard to access. So we really wanted to design something that was as simple and easy as humanly possible. Next slide, please. So this is what our application looked like. This is the entire thing. It was one page and we fit a lot of information on there. And I wanted to walk you guys through how we created it, what worked really well with this application, and what we're thinking about for summer 2025. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our process. So first, we reviewed the IFR in depth. It was long, as I'm sure many of you know. And we really tried to focus in on what was actually required for 2024 and where those flexibilities were, because we knew we wanted to keep it short and keep it simple. Then I think, like our other panelists have mentioned, the Summer EBT application requirements are really similar to the application requirements for free and reduced price meals. And there are lots of examples of what strong school meals applications look like online. So we looked at the federal prototype application and we looked at applications from lots and lots and lots and lots of school districts. And we thought about what we liked and what we didn't like and where we could be creative and what we needed to keep. Then we built a prototype in PowerPoint. So again, super low tech over here. And then we sought a lot of feedback from our customers, from people who were close to us, who didn't know anything about child nutrition programs. That is a photo of my husband and I. He is my #1 tester of all applications, and he doesn't know a lot about child nutrition. So he's a great audience to tell me when something doesn't make sense or needs to be worded differently. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So there are two things that I think made the application work really well. Acknowledging that paper applications are hard to access. But if you have to have a paper application, so you should think about how do you make that paper application accessible. So the things that we did in this space were we made our paper application available in six languages. There are the languages on the slide. We worked with an external translator to translate the application. And families could pick the application that matched their language of choice, download it, and fill it out in that language. This was really important to us, and it honestly wasn't that big of a lift, which was great. These languages are also the most common languages spoken in Virginia, which is why we picked them. The next thing that we focused on was using plain language. This is something that our other panelists talked about. So plain language is writing in a way that makes sense for a normal human being. Plain language should be written at a fifth grade reading level, and you should use words that make sense and avoid as much jargon as humanly possible. And then the last thing that we did was we gave examples of what we were looking for when we thought families would be confused. And we really honed in on the things that were confusing when we were testing our application. And we also provided helper text. So things that we thought no one knows what this word means. I think a good example of this is household. We gave an example of what we meant. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So on the left, you'll see our application in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but I've been promised that that is correct. And then on the right, you can see some examples of the plain language and helper text that I was referencing. So the example on the right, where we're talking about households, our helper text was include all adults and children living in your household. A household is a group of people who live together and usually purchase and prepare meals together. Then for examples, telling them what we were looking for with their school ID, telling them how we wanted to see their birthday, explaining how we wanted to see social security number if they were able to provide it. Next slide, please. The other thing that we really focused on was reducing the administrative burden with our paper application. I don't like filling out paper applications. I don't think any of our clients like filling out paper applications. So it was important for us that you could get through this paper application fast. So the number one thing we prioritized was getting it to one page. So our application was one page, single-sided. And this was really helpful for our clients because it meant they didn't have to keep track of multiple pages. They didn't have to turn over the page to find the next set of questions. Everything they needed to answer was available. It was also really helpful for our team because if you have a stack of paper applications that you have to scan into a system, if those applications aren't double-sided, it's really easy to lose the second page and then you have to track it down or reach out to that family, and that's not something that anyone wants to be doing. The next thing that we did was we omitted every single question we were allowed to omit for 2024. So 2024, when you dig into the IFR, there were lots of flexibilities that don't exist for 2025, but we took advantage of every single flexibility that was there. And then the last thing that we did was our paper application was fillable. So if families had access to a computer for more than a couple of minutes, they could type their responses, the cells would adjust, so like the text fit in the square. And this was helpful because it's often easier to type and it's easier for our team to read typed responses than handwritten responses. Next slide, please. So obviously nothing is ever perfect. So there are some things that we're thinking about for 2025 that are a little bit different. Next slide, please. So for 2025, there are a couple of things we know that we're changing, that we've already changed. So the first one was similar to Connecticut, our students have a school ID that's specific to every single child. On our application, we referred to that ID as their school ID. No one knew what that was, and we didn't explain what we were looking for, so a lot of families just left it blank. And like Connecticut, we use that ID to match children across our system, so when that number is left blank, it's really difficult for us. So we went back to the drawing board, and this summer we're testing child school ID, and we're hoping that that is helpful or makes more sense to families. I'm also thinking the idea of telling folks where they can find it is a really good one. The next thing that this is like kind of on our application, but it's not like as specific to our application as it is to how we're talking about the program at large. So if you've been in the summer EBT space for a while, you've probably heard this term income eligible medical assistance, which is a term lots of states use to explain who needed to apply and who didn't need to apply. Families did not know what income eligible medical assistance means, which makes a lot of sense. So we're thinking through how can we explain this in a way that does make sense. So for us, we're thinking we're going to post some explainers that explain the income percentages that link to a chart. And we're also going to call out programs that have higher income eligibility to say, if you participate in this program or this program or this program, a better way to determine your eligibility is to look at your household income. And you can use this eligibility screener here to do that. And then the other thing that we have to change is how household income is reported. So in 2024, families could provide a like a roll-up number and attest that it was true. In 2025, that flexibility is going away, and families have to report income by each member of their household, including their children, by income source. So this is the biggest change, and I think like the biggest administrative shift in terms of what families need to report. Next slide, please. Things that we're thinking about changing and we're still working through. So like Kelsey told us at the top, states aren't required to ask caregivers a lot of information about themselves to deliver these benefits. And we took that to heart. We asked very few questions about the person who is filling out the application. And in some ways, that's great because it made it easier to fill out, but in other ways, it was difficult because it was hard for us to match people in our system without their birth date or their social security number. So social security numbers can't be required. We're not going to require birth date, but we are thinking about including both of those as optional fields, just because it really does make matching on our end so much easier. Another thing we're thinking about is how to be more clear about what is required and what is optional, because we know that some families don't have all of this information. We want them to know what they have to respond to, but a lot of the optional information is also the information that's really helpful for our team. So kind of working through that balance as well. And then the last thing we're thinking about is how can we make it easier for families to share their applications with us and access applications. So they were only available on our website. They had to be downloaded, they had to be printed, they had to be returned to us. This is not an easy process, and I think there are things that we can do to make paper applications more accessible and easier for families to turn in that we're thinking about right now. Next slide, please. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me or my colleague, Michelle. Our emails are on the slide, and I'm sure Kelsey and Steve would be happy to share them with you. And next slide. That's it. Thanks, y'all.
Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. I'm gonna give everyone a few minutes to put any questions in the Q&A function at the bottom. And we did have a couple of questions to get started. So I am going to start with a question for Shannon. Have you heard any response from your schools about how easy this application is, from the feedback from students on how easy the application is, or any additional burden that has been reduced on the schools from potentially pandemic EBT?
Everything is less for schools than pandemic EBT. So pandemic EBTs was definitely a challenge for the schools. So really their schools haven't reported having as many challenges around making sure they knew who to send or where they could send folks. During pandemic EBT, we did not have a hotline. We did stand up a Summer EBT dedicated hotline and call center for this. And so that was really, I think, tremendously helpful. We did not launch a robust communications plan last year, partially because it was the first year and we were trying to just get the benefits out the door, and partially because I was not able to hire anybody in that timeline. And so we run all of the child nutrition programs. So it was me basically as a side gig. And I was a little bit concerned about sending out too much of a communication plan. So now hopefully we do have somebody who's hired. And so we'll be able to approach that differently. I remembered what I was going to say. One of the things that was kind of this hidden nugget in USDA's Q&As, questions and answers, and can't remember which revision it was because that's up to about 90 Q&As now. But there was this little nugget where it said, if your Summer EBT application has all of the 4 required elements if a family completes those requirements that would be required on the free reduced price application for school meals, that we could use that Summer EBT application to be able to confer eligibility for the following school year, as long as that application was submitted after July 1st. So that's what the school years run on, and that's when all the reimbursements and income levels change. And so that's what we use for the coming school year. That's when officially school year starts. And so we, it was driving me nuts. So with Nutrilink, we asked them, we want this field, we want to explain it to folks. We put it in the tooltip. They sent us, we were able to, as Brent said, we kind of arrange the fields to be something that we could make compatible with these other systems we had going on. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me how to confer that eligibility back to schools because of all of the different startup other criteria, like the 30-day carryover and everything else that school districts have to deal with. And so I think we finally figured it out. And so hopefully we'll be able to operationalize that for 2025. And that will create some burden for the schools because we've never done it before. No, and apparently we're the only state in the nation who's really looking into this and trying to figure it out. So we have some more fun adventures ahead, but I'm absolutely determined that if we can eliminate additional paperwork, administrative burden for households who are low income, just trying to feed their families, then we will do that. So we're trying to figure that out. We didn't get, like, between pandemic EBT versus summer EBT last year, it was just so much less confusing for households and for the schools. And we had that dedicated hotline. So I think that was wonderful. We're going to hopefully develop like a little web button link with the summer EBT logo we can send out to schools so that they can link directly to that. So we'll be doing a lot more in 2025, but we are going to get some pushback from the schools because of the system that I think we're going to be using to confer that eligibility. And it's just a totally different way of doing business. So I think it's going to, I think next year I'll probably get a few talking tos.
Thanks for that, Shannon. Kirsten, I have a question for you. When families sent their applications to the state, did the state process those applications, or were they sent to school districts to process?
Great question. The state processed them.
Thank you. And Kirsten, one last question for you. If a state is just beginning to create their own application, what are some of the things that you would suggest they keep in mind, like top things that they might want to keep in mind?
Well, I'm happy to just send you ours if that would be helpful. You're welcome to send me an email and I can send you a copy. I think the other thing is to, like, and this is not a specific thing, but I think to print it out yourself, fill it out yourself, see if you can actually fit your responses in the blocks that you provided, and then go have some of your friends who don't apply for benefits very often do the same thing and listen to those people and make those changes. I mean, I think I probably made like 32 different versions of our application. And the most helpful thing was like printing it out and looking at it and filling it out myself and being like, did this make sense? Like, where would I logically look next? And thinking about like the flow that a real person goes through when they sit down with a paper form. And I can add more detail on the last question. So we hired a team of 4 contractors, and they were responsible for processing our application. So we had a small budget for part-time staff.
Thank you so much. Brent, you may or may not know the answer to this, but do states need to decide to use the Nutrilink application before the February 15th deadline, or could they opt in after?
They can opt in after. Yeah. Yep. We've had states opt in at different times. So yeah, obviously that deadline is for USDA, but no, they can opt in at any point in time.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come through. So Steve, can you go to the next slide? Just wanted to wrap up with some Summer EBT resources from FRAC. This has a bunch of links to our website, to our state fact sheets, as well as a one-pager on why states should operate summer EBT and summer nutrition programs and maximize both. We have a bunch of resources on our website. So I want to thank all of our panelists for all of the great information that they've presented today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. And thank you so much, panelists, and have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.